3 weeks ago, I walked into what should have been the interview of my dreams. Instead, I found my mother sitting in the conference room telling my potential boss that I was mentally unstable and couldn't handle responsibility. The job went to someone else that same day. But this morning, my husband Daniel handed me a folder that changed everything. Turns out, I don't need their job. I already own the company. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Castellano Digital Solutions building as I sat in the marble lobby, smoothing down my navy blazer for the fourth time. My portfolio felt heavy in my lap, filled with marketing strategies and business proposals I'd spent months perfecting. This wasn't just any interview. This was the senior project manager position I'd been working toward for 3 years at one of Portland's most respected tech consulting firms. I'd been networking with Marcus Chen, their VP of operations, for months through industry events. He'd personally recommended me for this role after seeing my presentation on digital transformation strategies at the Northwest Business Summit. My qualifications were solid, my track record was impressive, and for once in my life I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, glanced up from her computer screen. "Miss Harper, they're ready for you in conference room B. Just down the hall, second door on your right." I stood up, took a deep breath, and walked toward what I thought would be my future. The conference room door was slightly ajar, and I could hear voices inside. Professional, measured tones discussing quarterly projections and client retention rates. I knocked gently and pushed the door open. "Good morning, I'm Zoe Harper, here for the 2 o'clock interview." That's when I saw her. My mother, Patricia Harper, sitting at the polished conference table like she belonged there, wearing her best black pantsuit and the smile she reserved for fooling strangers. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. Marcus Chen looked confused, his eyes darting between my mother and me. "I'm sorry, there seems to be some confusion. This woman said she was your emergency contact and needed to speak with us about something urgent regarding your application." My mother's voice was smooth, practical. "I apologize for the interruption, but as Zoe's mother, I felt it was my responsibility to share some concerns about her mental state and ability to handle high-pressure situations." The words hit me like ice water. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my mother destroy my career with the same calm precision she'd used to undermine me my entire life. Linda Rodriguez, the HR director, was taking notes. Marcus looked deeply uncomfortable. "Ms. Harper has a history of anxiety and depression." My mother continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "She's been struggling with stability issues, and I'm worried that a demanding position like this might trigger another episode. I've seen her fall apart under pressure before." I finally found my voice, though it came out shakier than I wanted. "That's not true. I've never had any mental health issues that would affect my work performance." My mother turned to me with that pitying look I knew so well. "Honey, denial is part of the problem. Remember when you had that breakdown at Thanksgiving? You were so overwhelmed you couldn't even stay for dinner." The breakdown she was referring to was me leaving early because she'd spent the entire meal criticizing my career choices in front of my extended family. But the way she told it, with tears forming in her eyes and her voice full of maternal worry, it sounded like I was unstable. Marcus cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reschedule this interview to give you time to address these concerns." I knew what that meant. There would be no rescheduling. No company wants to hire someone whose own mother shows up to warn them about mental health issues. I could see it in their faces, the way they were already mentally moving on to the next candidate. "I understand," I said quietly, gathering what remained of my dignity. "Thank you for your time." I walked out of that conference room with my mother trailing behind me, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to my professional death. In the elevator, she had the audacity to put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I couldn't let you embarrass yourself. You know how you get when you're stressed. I was protecting you." I stared at my reflection in the polished elevator doors, watching my face crumble and then reconstruct itself into something harder. "How did you even know about this interview?" "Brianna mentioned it. She's worried about you too." "Of course. My sister, the golden child with her lifestyle blog and her picture-perfect social media presence, had been the one to leak my private business to our mother. Brianna, who'd never held a real job in her life, was worried about my ability to handle responsibility." The elevator doors opened, and I walked out without another word. I could hear my mother calling after me, but I didn't turn around. I pushed through the glass doors of the building and into the Portland rain, letting it soak through my blazer and ruin my carefully styled hair. My phone buzzed as I sat in my car in the parking garage. A text from Marcus Chen. "I'm sorry about today's circumstances. Due to the concerns raised, We've decided to move forward with another candidate. Best of luck in your future endeavors. I screenshotted the mess. I'd learned over the years to document everything when it came to my family's sabotage, not because I planned to do anything with the evidence, but because seeing it in writing helped me remember that I wasn't imagining things. The drive home to our house in the Pearl District felt endless. Daniel's Tesla was already in the driveway, which meant he'd left work early. He must have gotten my text about the interview being today. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to figure out how to explain what had happened without sounding like I was making excuses. Daniel met me at the door, his dark eyes immediately scanning my face. He'd gotten good at reading my moods over our 3 years of marriage, especially when it came to my family drama. "How did it go?" he asked, though my expression probably already gave him the answer. My mother showed up and told them I was mentally unstable. His jaw tightened. Daniel had never liked my family, particularly after witnessing how they treated me at our wedding. My mother had spent the entire reception telling anyone who would listen about how worried she was that I was settling for Daniel because I didn't think I could do better. "She what?" I collapsed onto our gray sectional, still wearing my damp interview clothes. "She somehow found out about the interview, showed up early, and convinced them I was having mental health issues. They've already given the job to someone else." Daniel sat down beside me, his hand finding mine. "Zoe, this has to stop. She can't keep destroying your opportunity." "What am I supposed to do? Cut off my entire family? Maybe it's time to consider that." I'd heard this suggestion from Daniel before, usually after family gatherings where I'd come home drained and questioning my own reality. But Patricia Harper was my mother. Brianna was my sister. Despite everything, they were the only family I had left after my father died 5 years ago. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me. I kept replaying the interview, wondering if there was something I could have said or done differently. Maybe if I'd been more assertive, if I'd challenged my mother's claims more forcefully, if I'd somehow anticipated this sabotage. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about anything I'd done wrong. This was about a pattern that had been playing out my entire life. My mother couldn't stand to see me succeed independently. Every achievement had to be diminished. Every opportunity had to be questioned. Every victory had to be turned into a cautionary tale about my limitations. When I was 12, I'd won a creative writing contest at school. Instead of celebrating, my mother had used it as an opportunity to lecture me about the impracticality of artistic pursuits. When I graduated valedictorian from Portland State, she'd spent the entire ceremony talking to other parents about how book smarts didn't translate to real-world success. When Daniel proposed, she'd pulled me aside to ask if I was sure I wasn't just desperate to get married before I got too old. The next morning, I called in sick to my current job at a small marketing firm downtown. I couldn't face explaining to my colleagues why I hadn't gotten the position everyone knew I was interviewing for. Instead, I drove to grind coffee in the Pearl District and claimed a corner table with my laptop. I needed to figure out my next move. The Castellano Digital position had been my dream job, but it wasn't the only opportunity in Portland. I opened my LinkedIn profile and started browsing similar positions at other companies. Project manager roles, business development positions, marketing director opening. All of them seemed possible, until I imagined my mother somehow finding out about each interview and poisoning those wells too. My phone rang. Nicole Winters, my best friend since college and the only person who truly understood my family dynamic. "I just saw your LinkedIn activity," she said without preamble. "What happened with the Castellano interview?" I told her everything, from finding my mother in the conference room to the text rejection from Marcus Chen. Nicole listened without interruption, which I appreciate. She'd learned over the years that I needed to get the whole story out before I could start processing it. "Zoe," she said when I finished, "this is beyond normal family dysfunction. This is sabotage." No, I don't think you do. Your mother deliberately destroyed a job opportunity. That's not concern or protection or misguided love. That's malicious." I stirred my latte, watching the foam swirl. "So what do I do about it?" "You document everything, you build a case, and you protect yourself from future attacks." "A case for what?" "I don't know yet, but this pattern of behavior, it has to be actionable somehow. She's interfering with your ability to earn a living." Nicole was a paralegal at a family law firm downtown. She thought in terms of evidence and legal remedies, which sometimes seemed extreme when applied to family relationships. But maybe extreme was what this situation called for. After we hung up, I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing. I called it documentation log, and began listing every instance I could remember of my mother undermining my career or personal life. The college scholarship she'd convinced me not to accept because it would mean moving away from home. The internship she'd called to decline on my behalf because she thought the company looked unstable. The boyfriend she'd told embarrassing stories about until he stopped coming around. As I typed, a pattern emerged that was even clearer than I'd realized. My mother's sabotage always escalated whenever I was on the verge of a breakthrough, a new job, a serious relationship, a move toward independence. She had an uncanny ability to sense when I was about to outgrow her control and to intervene at precisely the right moment to keep me dependent. I was so absorbed in my documentation that I didn't notice Daniel approaching my table until he slid into the chair across from me. "I thought I might find you here," he said, signaling the barista for his usual espresso. "You always come here when you need to think. Shouldn't you be at work?" I told my assistant to reschedule my afternoon meetings. "I was worried about you." This was one of the things I loved most about Daniel. He had the kind of demanding CEO schedule that could easily become an excuse for emotional unavailability, but he'd never once made me feel like his work was more important than our relationship. "I'm documenting everything," I said, turning my laptop screen so he could see. "Nicole thinks I should build a case." Daniel scanned the list.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
His expression growing darker with each item. "Jesus, Zoe, I knew your mother was difficult, but this is systematic. I keep thinking I must be exaggerating, that maybe she really thinks she's helping. Nobody helps by showing up to sabotage job interviews." I closed the laptop and looked at my husband, really looked at him. Daniel Castellano was objectively successful. At 34, he'd built his consulting firm from a one-man operation into a 50-employee company with clients across the Pacific Northwest. He was smart, driven, and despite his success, surprisingly humble about his achievements. Sometimes I wondered what he saw in me, not in a self-deprecating way, but genuinely. I was competent at my job, reasonably attractive, and we had good conversations, but I'd never built anything from scratch the way he had. I'd never taken the kinds of risks that led to real success. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Always. Do you think I'm actually capable of handling a high-pressure job? Be honest." Daniel's dark eyes met mine directly. "I think you're one of the most capable people I know. I also think you've been conditioned to doubt yourself by people who benefit from your insecurity." "That's not really an answer." "Yes, it is. You're asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether you can handle pressure. The question is why you've been taught to believe you can't." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the coffee shop creating a familiar backdrop. Daniel's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with the automatic reflex of someone whose business required constant availability. "I should get back," he said, standing up. "But Zoe, I want you to do something for me." "What?" "Stop looking for jobs for a few days. Just stop. Give yourself some time to process what happened before you jump back into the market." "I can't afford to take time off. The longer I wait, the harder it gets to explain the gap. Trust me on this. Take the weekend. We'll figure out a strategy on Monday." I wanted to argue, but Daniel's tone suggested he had something specific in mind. He kissed me goodbye and left me alone with my documentation and my spiraling thoughts. That evening, Brianna called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mom told me what happened at your interview," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "She's really worried about you. She should be worried about herself. She sabotaged my career. Zoe, you know that's not what happened. She was trying to protect you from embarrassing yourself." I felt that familiar sensation of reality shifting, the way it always did when my family presented their version of events. For a moment, I almost bought it. Maybe I had been delusional to think I could handle a senior management role. Maybe my mother had saved me from failure. Then I remembered Daniel's words about being conditioned to doubt myself. "Brianna, how exactly did Mom find out about my interview?" "I might have mentioned it when we had lunch last week. I specifically asked you not to tell her because I knew she'd interfere. I didn't think she'd actually show up. I thought she might just call you to wish you luck, or something." "When has Mom ever called to wish me luck?" There was a pause. Brianna wasn't stupid. She knew our mother's history as well as I did. "Look, maybe she handled it wrong, but she loves you. We both do. We just don't want to see you get hurt. The only people who have ever hurt me are the two of you." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not from anger but from the effort of finally saying something true out loud. Daniel found me sitting on our bedroom floor, surrounded by old photo albums and yearbooks. I'd been looking for evidence of my own competence, trying to remember who I'd been before my family convinced me I was fragile. "What's all this?" he asked, settling down beside me, trying to remember if I was always like this, or if it's something they trained into me. I showed him my high school yearbook, where I'd been captain of the debate team and president of the student council, my college diploma with its summa cum laude honor, performance reviews from my current job that consistently rated me as exceeding expectations. "You see it, right?" I asked. "I wasn't always this insecure mess, who second guesses everything. You're not an insecure mess now. You're a competent professional who's been gaslit by her own family." I leaned against his shoulder, feeling some of the tension leave my body. I keep thinking I should call Mom and try to work this out. What would working it out look like? I don't know. An apology, a promise not to interfere again. Do you think she'd give you either of those things? I considered this honestly. In my entire life, I couldn't remember my mother ever apologizing for anything. When she was wrong, she either changed the subject or reframed the situation so that her actions seemed justified. No, I admit, she'd probably tell me I'm being dramatic and that everything she did was for my own good. So what's the point of the conversation? Because she's my mother. Being someone's mother doesn't give you the right to destroy their life. Daniel's phone buzzed with what looked like an urgent email. He glanced at it, then set the phone aside without responding. "Is everything okay with work?" I asked. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." "You sure? You never ignore work emails. Tonight is about you." I studied my husband's face. There was something different in his expression, a tension I couldn't quite identify. But before I could ask about it, he was pulling me to my feet. "Come on," he said. "Let's order takeout and watch something mindless on Netflix. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to rebuild your career without your family's interference." We ended up on the couch, with Thai food and a romantic comedy that required zero brain power. Daniel seemed distracted, checking his phone more frequently than usual. But whenever I asked about it, he brushed off my concerns. Around midnight, as we were getting ready for bed, he stopped me in the hallway.
Okay.
"Zoe, I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, whatever you decide to do about your family, I'm completely on your side. I know that. Do you? Because I think sometimes you feel like you have to handle everything alone." I looked at my husband, really looked at him. 3 years of marriage, 5 years together total, and he still sometimes surprised me with his insight. "I do feel like that sometimes. You don't have to. We're a team, even if it means dealing with my crazy family drama. Especially that." I fell asleep that night feeling more supported than I had in weeks. Whatever came next, at least I wasn't facing it alone. The next morning was Saturday, which meant no work obligations and no pressure to immediately start job hunt. Daniel was already awake when I opened my eyes, sitting on the edge of the bed with his laptop open and a cup of coffee in his hand. "Morning," I mumbled, squinting at the sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows. "Good morning. How'd you sleep?" "Better than I expected." I sat up, noting the serious expression on his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I need to show you something." He turned the laptop screen toward me. It displayed what looked like legal documents. Pages of dense text with official letterheads and signatures. "What is?" "It's a partnership agreement. From 2019, when I was setting up Castellano Digital Solutions." I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus on the small print. "Okay, look at page 3, under the section labeled Equity Distribution." I found the section and read it twice before the words made sense. According to the document, 40% of Castellano Digital Solutions was owned by something called the ZH Trust. "What's the ZH Trust?" Daniel's smile was small but significant. "The Zoe Harper Trust. ZH, your initials." I stared at the screen, the implications slowly sinking in. "I don't understand. When I started the company, I wanted to make sure you were protected. If something happened to me, if the business failed, if we got divorced, whatever. So I set up a trust in your name and transferred nearly half the ownership to it. But I never signed anything." "You didn't need to. It was my company to distribute as I saw fit. The trust documents are in our safe, along with your birth certificate and passport." I was fully awake now, my mind racing through the implications. "So I own 40% of your company, our company, and yet, how much is the company worth?" Daniel closed the laptop and set it aside. "Based on our last valuation for the Series A funding round, about $12 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $12 million. My 40% stake would be worth nearly $5 million. "I don't understand why you're telling me this now. Because yesterday you were sitting in this room, questioning whether you were capable of handling professional responsibility. And I realized you've been working your ass off trying to climb the corporate ladder when you're already a multi-millionaire business owner." I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking down at the Portland street below. People were walking their dogs, heading to coffee shops, living their normal Saturday morning lives. Meanwhile, I was learning that I was secretly wealthy. Zoe, Daniel's voice was gentle. Talk to me. I feel like I don't know anything about my own life. What do you mean? I turned back to face him. I've been letting my mother convince me that I'm incompetent and unstable. I've been doubting my own abilities and settling for jobs that don't challenge me. And meanwhile, I own a piece of a multi-million-dollar company. You own a piece of our multi-million-dollar company. We built it together, even if your name isn't on the letterhead. How? Daniel stood up and walked over to me. Do you remember when I was trying to land the Morrison Industries account? You spent 3 weekends helping me restructure the entire proposal. You caught the error in their budget projections that would have cost us the contract. I did remember. It had been early in our marriage, when Daniel's company was still small and every client mattered. In the Martinez Group, you developed their entire social media strategy. That was just helping out. That was strategic business development that led to a 6-figure contract. Zoe, you've been contributing to this company's success for years. I just made it official on paper. I sank into the chair by our bedroom window, trying to process this information. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I wanted you to find your own path first. I didn't want you to feel like you had to work for me, or that your career was tied to our marriage.
But now I think your family has damaged your confidence so badly that you've forgotten who you are, and maybe knowing that you're already successful will help you remember. I looked at my husband, this man who had apparently been protecting my financial future without me even knowing it. So what happens now? Now you decide what you want to do. You can keep looking for traditional employment if that's what fulfills you. You can take a more active role at Castellano Digital. You can start your own company. You can tell your mother to go to hell and never speak to her again. All of the above? All of the above. I spent the rest of the morning reading through the trust documents and partnership agreements. Daniel was right. I'd been contributing to the company's success for years without realizing it. Client presentations I'd helped refine, marketing strategies I'd developed, problems I'd solved during dinner conversations that had turned into weekend work sessions. I wasn't just Daniel's wife who happened to be good at business. I was his business partner who happened to be his wife. Around noon, my phone started ringing. My mother's number appeared on the screen. Don't answer it, Daniel said from the kitchen, where he was making us lunch. I should probably talk to her eventually. Why? Because ignoring the problem won't make it go away. The problem isn't going to go away no matter what you do. The question is whether you want to keep letting it control your life. I let the call go to voicemail. Then I listened to the message. Zoe, honey, it's Mom. I've been thinking about yesterday, and I want you to know that I don't regret what I did. That job would have been too much pressure for you, and you would have ended up having a breakdown. I saved you from that embarrassment, but I think you should call me so we can talk about finding you something more suitable to your abilities. Maybe something part-time or with less responsibility. Love you. I played the message for Daniel. His expression grew darker with each word. She doesn't think she did anything wrong, I said. Of course she doesn't. She thinks she's protecting you from your own incompetence. Maybe she is. Zoe, Daniel's voice was sharp. Stop. You own 40% of a $12 million company. You have a master's degree in business administration. You've been successfully employed for your entire adult life. You are not incompetent. But what if? No what ifs. Your mother is wrong about you. She's been wrong about you your entire life, and now you have the financial independence to never have to care about her opinion again. I stared at my phone, thinking about calling my mother back. The old Zoe would have called, would have apologized for being upset, would have let Patricia Harper rewrite the narrative until I believed I was the problem. But the new Zoe, the one who apparently owned a multi-million-dollar business, had other options. I blocked my mother's number. That afternoon, Nicole arrived with a bottle of wine and a laptop bag that looked like it weighed 20 pounds. She'd insisted on coming over after I'd texted her about the business revelation, claiming she needed to see the documents with her own eyes. This is insane, she said, spreading the trust papers across our dining room table. You've been a secret millionaire this whole time and didn't know it. Apparently, and your husband just casually mentioned it after your mother destroyed your job interview. Daniel emerged from the kitchen with 3 glasses and a cheese board. I'd been looking for the right time to tell her. Yesterday's disaster seemed like it. Nicole looked up from the documents, her paralegal training evident in how systematically she was reviewing each page. These are ironclad. Zoe, you don't just own part of this company on paper.
You have voting rights, profit sharing, decision-making authority. This isn't a gift or a gesture. This is real business ownership. I poured myself a generous glass of wine. It doesn't feel real. That's because you've been conditioned to think small, Nicole said. Your family has spent years convincing you that you're not capable of success, so when actual success is right in front of you, your brain can't process it. She pulled out her laptop and opened what looked like a spreadsheet. I did some research on Castellano Digital after you texted me. They've got contracts with Nike, Intel, and 3 major healthcare systems. Their revenue growth over the past 2 years has been exponential. Daniel nodded. We're actually in talks with a venture capital firm about expanding into California markets. How much expansion are we talking about? I asked, the word we feeling strange in my mouth. Potentially doubling our workforce and revenue within 18 months. Nicole whistled low. Zoe, your 40% stake could be worth $10 million by next year. The number felt abstract, like play money in a board game. I'd spent so many years worrying about making rent, saving for vacations, budgeting for car repair. The idea of having enough money to never worry about those things again was incomprehensible. There's something else, Daniel said, pulling another folder from his briefcase. I had my lawyer draw up some additional paperwork after what happened yesterday. He handed me a document titled Irrevocable Trust Amendment. I scanned the legal language, most of which was incomprehensible, until I reached a section that made my heart race. This gives me full control over my trust assets, complete control. You can liquidate your stake, sell it, use it as collateral, transfer it, whatever you want. I can't touch it. Your family can't touch it. And even if something happens to our marriage, it's yours. Nicole was reading over my shoulder. Holy shit. Zoe, this is financial independence in its purest form. I set the document down carefully, as if it might dissolve if I handled it too roughly. Why are you doing this now? Daniel sat down across from me, his expression serious. Because yesterday showed me that your family will never stop trying to control your life. And the only way to be truly free from that control is to have enough resources that their opinions become irrelevant. My phone, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, started buzzing incessantly. The sound carried through our open concept house like an angry wasp. That's probably my mother, I said. She's been trying to call all afternoon. Let her call, Nicole said. You blocked her number, right? From my phone, but she's probably using different numbers. Daniel walked to the kitchen and returned with my phone. The screen showed 7 missed calls from 3 different numbers, plus a string of text messages. Should I read them? I asked. Do you want to? Nicole countered. I thought about it. The old me would have read every message immediately, would have felt guilty for ignoring my mother's attempts to reach me, would have called back to smooth things over. But the new me, the one who apparently owned millions of dollars in business assets, was curious what Patricia Harper would do when her usual manipulation tactics didn't work. Read them out loud, I decided. Daniel scrolled through the messages. First one says, please call me back. We need to discuss your future. Second one, I talked to Brianna and she's very concerned about your mental state. Third, Daniel is a bad influence on you. He's making you think you're more capable than you are. She's targeting Daniel now. Gets worse. Your father wouldn't approve of how you're treating your family. And the last one, I'm coming over to check on you since you won't answer your phone. The threat of my mother showing up unannounced sent a spike of anxiety through my chest. She'd done it before, usually when I was trying to establish boundaries. She'd arrive with bags of groceries or some transparent excuse, then spend hours dissecting my life choices until I felt like a rebellious teenager instead of a grown woman. She can't just show up here, Actually she can, Nicole pointed out. It's not illegal to knock on someone's door, but I don't have to let her in. No, you don't. Daniel was already moving toward the windows, checking the street view. If she shows up, we don't answer we let her stand out there and make a scene if that's what she wants to do. What if she calls the police, claims she's worried about my safety? Then we show them that you're fine, that you're an adult making your own decisions, and that this is harassment. Nicole closed her laptop and reached for her wine glass. Zoe, can I ask you something? Sure. When's the last time you made a major life decision without worrying about how your family would react? I considered the question. I don't know, maybe college. And even then, I chose Portland State because it was close to home and wouldn't upset anyone. What about marrying Daniel? My mother spent the entire engagement trying to talk me out of it. She said I was rushing into things, that I didn't really know him, that successful men like him only married women like me as placeholders until someone better came along. Daniel's jaw tightened. I'd told him some of this before, but not the full extent of my mother's campaign against our relationship. And you married him anyway? Nicole asked. Eventually, after months of her wearing me down and me second-guessing everything. But you did it. So you're capable of making decisions that go against your family's wishes. You just need practice. A car door slammed outside, followed by the distinctive click of high heels on pavement. We all froze, listening as the footsteps approached our front door. She actually came, I whispered. 3 sharp knocks echoed through the house. Then my mother's voice, artificially sweet and loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Zoe, honey, it's Mom. I brought you some dinner since you've been so stressed. We sat in complete silence. The knocking continued, more insistent now. Zoe, I know you're in there. Daniel's car is in the driveway. More knocking. Then the sound of my mother walking around to the side of the house, probably trying to peer through windows. This is insane, Nicole muttered. My phone started ringing again. This time it was Brianna's number. Don't answer it, Daniel said, but I was already swiping to accept the call. Zoe, thank God. Mom is at your house and she's really worried about you. I'm fine, Brianna. I just don't want to talk to her right now. She said you blocked her number. That's not like you. Maybe it's exactly like me and you've never paid attention. There was a pause. I could hear my mother's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. She thinks Daniel is manipulating you, Brianna continued. She's worried he's isolating you from your family. My family isolated me from my family. Daniel is the only one who's ever supported my goals. What goals? Zoe, you work at a small marketing firm doing entry-level campaigns. That's not exactly a high-powered career. The casual dismissal of my work hit harder than I expected. Brianna had never held a traditional job, had never worked for anyone else or been responsible for anything beyond her social media brand, but somehow she felt qualified to judge my professional achievements. Actually, Brianna, I own 40% of a multi-million-dollar consulting firm, so I'm doing just fine career-wise. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? Daniel made me a partner in Castellano Digital when he started the company. I've been a business owner for 3 years without knowing it. That's impossible. I'm looking at the legal documents right now. I could hear muffled conversation in the background. Then my mother's voice came on the line. Zoe, whatever Daniel has told you, whatever papers he's shown you, it's not real. Men like him don't give away millions of dollars to women like you. The phrase women like you landed like a slap. It contained every insult my mother had ever leveled at me, every way she'd made me feel small and unworthy. What kind of woman am I exactly? You know what I mean. You're sweet and caring, but you're not business-minded. You don't have that killer instinct. Daniel is probably just trying to make you feel important so you'll stop pushing for a real career. I looked at Daniel, who was watching my face carefully, then at Nicole, who was shaking her head in disgust, then at the trust documents spread across our dining room table, each page stamped and notarized and completely real. Mom, I'm going to explain this once, and then I'm hanging up. I am a business owner. I am financially independent. I am not the fragile, incompetent person you've convinced yourself I am, and I don't need your permission or approval to live my life. Honey, you're having some kind of breakdown. This isn't like you. You're right. It's not like me. The old me would have apologized by now and invited you in for dinner, but the old me didn't know she was a millionaire. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone. How do you feel? Nicole asked, terrified and exhilarated. Good, that means you're growing. The knocking had stopped, but I could still hear my mother's voice outside, though it was moving farther away, probably calling Brianna to report on my mental state. She's going to escalate this, I said. My mother doesn't accept defeat gracefully. Let her escalate. Daniel, you have resources now. Legal resources, financial resources, emotional resources. She can't control someone who doesn't need anything from her. That evening, after Nicole left and my mother finally gave up her sidewalk vigil, Daniel and I sat on our back deck with the trust document. I'd read through them 3 times, but I still felt like I was learning a foreign language. I need to understand what this actually means, I said, not just the dollar amounts, but the practical implication. Daniel pulled out his laptop and opened a presentation that looked like it was designed for potential investors. This is our company overview. I want you to see what you own. The first slide showed Castellano Digital's growth trajectory over the past 4 years. Revenue had increased from $200,000 in year 1 to $2 million last year. Employee count had grown from just Daniel to 53 people across Portland and Seattle. We started in our spare bedroom, he said, clicking to the next slide. Remember when you helped me set up that makeshift office? I did remember. We'd been dating for about a year, and Daniel had been working 16-hour days trying to get his first few clients. I'd spent weekends helping him organize files, create client presentations, and research potential leads. I thought I was just being a supportive girlfriend. You were being a business partner, you just didn't know it yet. The presentation continued with slides about current clients, revenue projections, and expansion plan. Each slide reminded me of conversations we'd had over dinner, problems I'd helped solve, strategies I'd suggested during late-night work sessions. The Martinez Group account, I said, pointing to a slide showing their contract value. I remember you were stuck on their proposal for weeks, until you suggested focusing on their customer retention challenges instead of their acquisition goals. That insight landed us a 2-year contract worth $400,000. The Morrison Industries presentation, you were going to pitch them a standard digital transformation package, and you pointed out that their real problem was internal communication, not external marketing. We restructured the entire proposal around workflow optimization. Slide after slide showed the results of work I'd contributed to without realizing its value. My suggestions had become service offerings. My insights had become selling points. My late-night brainstorming sessions had become profitable client solutions. I really am a business owner, I said, the reality finally sinking in. You really are. And my mother has been convincing me I'm incompetent while I was building a multi-million-dollar company. Your mother has been gaslighting you about your own success. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The Portland skyline was visible from our deck, the city lights beginning to twinkle as the sun set behind the hills. Somewhere out there, my mother was probably calling relatives to complain about my behavior. Brianna was probably crafting social media posts about family loyalty. Both of them were operating under the assumption that I was the same insecure, dependent person I'd always been. But I wasn't that person anymore. Maybe I never had been. My phone, which I'd turned back on to check for work emails, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was my mother using yet another phone to reach me. But something made me look. Ms. Harper, this is Marcus Chen from Castellano Digital. I hope you don't mind that I got your number from our HR database. I wanted to follow up on yesterday's interview situation. My stomach dropped. Marcus Chen, the VP who had witnessed my mother's sabotage attempt. The interview that had started this entire revelation. What does he want? Daniel asked, reading over my shoulder. I don't know. I typed back, Hi Marcus, what can I help you with? His response came quickly. I'd like to schedule a private conversation with you, if you're available. There are some things about yesterday that don't add up, and I think you deserve to know what I've discovered. Daniel and I looked at each other. That's cryptic. Should I meet with him? Do you want to? I thought about it. Marcus Chen had seemed like a decent person during the brief interview before my mother's intervention. He looked genuinely uncomfortable with the situation, and his rejection email had been apologetic rather than dismissive. Yeah, I think I texted back, I'm available tomorrow afternoon if that works for you. Perfect. Can you meet me at Grind Coffee in the Pearl District at 2 p.m.? I'll be the one in the navy suit with a stack of folders. After I confirmed the meeting, Daniel looked troubled. What's wrong? I asked. I'm trying to figure out why the VP of operations at my company wants to meet privately with my wife about a job interview. Your company? Our company? But still, it's strange. Maybe he feels bad about how everything went down. Maybe he wants to apologize. Or maybe there's something else going on. We spent the rest of the evening speculating about Marcus Chen's motivations, but eventually gave up and went to bed. I lay awake for hours, my mind cycling through the events of the past 2 days. 48 hours ago, I'd been a struggling marketing professional whose biggest problem was her overbearing mother. Now I was a millionaire business owner whose biggest problem was still her overbearing mother, but at least I had the resources to do something about it. Around midnight, I heard a car door slam outside, then another. I got up and looked out the bedroom window to see 2 figures walking toward our front door. Even in the darkness,
I recognized the silhouettes. My mother and Brianna. Daniel, I whispered, shaking him awake. They're back. He sat up immediately, alert in the way that suggested this wasn't entirely unexpected. Both of them. The knocking started again, but this time it was different, more aggressive, more demanding. My mother's voice carried through the door. So, we're not leaving until you talk to us. We're your family, and family doesn't abandon each other. Then Brianna, we know you're awake. Your bedroom light is on. I realized I'd turned on the light when I got up to look out the window. Now they knew we were home, and choosing not to answer the door. This is harassment, Daniel said, reaching for his phone. I'm calling the police. Wait, I put my hand on his arm. Let me try something first. I walked to the front door and spoke through it, my voice calm and clear. Mom, Brianna, I can hear you. I'm choosing not to let you in because I don't want to have this conversation right now. Please respect my decision and leave. We're worried about you, my mother called back. Daniel has filled your head with lies. And you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Prove it. Open the door and talk to us like an adult. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. My mother was trying to goad me into opening the door by questioning my maturity, knowing that I'd spent my entire life trying to prove myself to her. But I didn't feel the usual urge to defend myself. Instead, I felt something I'd never felt before when dealing with my family: indifferent. I'm going back to bed, I said through the door. You can stand out there all night if you want, but I'm not changing my mind. I walked back to the bedroom, leaving them on the porch. Daniel followed, looking impressed. How do you feel? Like I just passed some kind of test. The knocking continued for another 20 minutes, accompanied by increasingly desperate pleas and threats. Then car doors slammed again, and they were gone. Think they'll come back?
Daniel asked. Probably, but I'm not the same person they're trying to manipulate. No, you're not. I fell asleep that night feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine peace. Not the temporary calm that came from avoiding conflict, but the deep satisfaction of knowing I'd acted according to my own values, instead of my family's expectations. The next morning, I woke up with a clear sense of purpose. I was going to meet with Marcus Chen and find out what he'd discovered about my job interview. I was going to start taking an active role in Castellano Digital's operations. And I was going to stop letting my mother's opinion of my capabilities influence my decisions. But first, I was going to do something I'd never done before. I was going to call my mother and set some boundaries. I made coffee, sat at our dining room table with the trust documents visible in front of me, and dialed her number from our landline. She answered on the first ring. Honey. Thank goodness. I was so worried after last night. Mom, I'm calling to tell you how things are going to work from now on. What do you mean? I mean, I'm setting some rules for our relationship. First, you will never again interfere with my career or professional opportunities. What you did at that interview was unacceptable, and it will not happen again. Honey, I was trying to protect you. Second, you will not show up at my house unannounced. If you want to see me, you'll call first and ask if it's convenient. This is ridiculous. I'm your mother. Third, you will stop telling people that I'm mentally unstable or incompetent. Those lies damage my reputation and my relationships. They're not lies if they're true. And finally, if you break any of these rules, I will cut off contact completely. No phone calls, no visits, no family gatherings. Nothing. There was a long silence. Then Daniel is really changing you. Daniel is helping me remember who I've always been underneath your manipulation. I have never manipulated you. Mom, yesterday you told a potential employer that I was mentally unstable. You've been manipulating me my entire life. I've been protecting you from making mistakes that would hurt you. The only mistake I made was listening to you for so long. Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. Fine. If this is how you want to treat your family, then I guess we'll see how long this rebellious phase lasts. It's not a phase. This is who I am now. I hung up before she could respond, then sat back in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. I just set clear boundaries with my mother for the first time in my adult life. And the world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. The next morning arrived with an unusual sense of clarity. I'd slept better than I had in months, despite the drama with my family. Setting those boundaries with my mother had felt like releasing a pressure valve I didn't even know existed. Daniel was already showered and dressed when I woke up, standing at our bedroom window with a cup of coffee and his phone pressed to his ear. I understand the timeline is aggressive, he was saying, but if we can deliver the preliminary assessment by Friday, I think we'll have a real shot at the contract. He noticed I was awake and mouthed good morning while continuing his conversation. I could hear the energy in his voice, the same excitement he got whenever a major business opportunity was developing. After he hung up, I asked, "New client, potentially, Northwest Health Systems wants to completely overhaul their patient data management. It could be our biggest contract yet." "How big?" "2.7 million over 18 months. I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's huge." "It is. And if we land it, your 40% stake becomes significantly more valuable." The casual way he said your 40% stake still felt surreal. 3 days ago, I'd been worried about whether I could afford to take a day off work to job hunt. Now I was discussing multi-million-dollar contracts as a business owner. "Tell me about the meeting today," Daniel said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "With Marcus Chen, I'm not sure what to expect." His text was pretty mysterious. "I've been thinking about it, and I can't figure out why he'd want to meet privately. If he just felt bad about the interview, he could have called or sent an email. Maybe he has information about my mother. Like maybe she's done this before to other people." Daniel's expression darkened. "That's a disturbing thought, but not impossible. Your mother seems to have made a career out of undermining people." I got dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing a black blazer and slacks that made me feel professional and confident. If Marcus Chen had information about my mother's sabotage tactics, I wanted to be prepared for whatever he might reveal. Grind Coffee was busier than usual when I arrived at 2 o'clock. The afternoon crowd of freelancers and remote workers had claimed most of the tables, their laptops and coffee cups creating a familiar urban scene. I spotted Marcus immediately, sitting at a corner table with 3 manila folders stacked in front of him. He stood up when he saw me approaching, extending his hand with a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Miss Harper, thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you'd want to after what happened. Call me Zoe, and honestly I'm curious what you wanted to discuss. Please, sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" I ordered a latte and waited while he organized his folders with the precision of someone who'd spent years in corporate environments. Marcus Chen looked to be in his early 40s, with graying hair at his temples and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much office politics. "I'm going to be direct," he said once we were both settled. "What happened at your interview was highly unusual, and some things about it have been bothering me ever since." "What kind of thing?" "Well, first, your mother claimed to be your emergency contact. But when I checked your application, you'd listed your husband Daniel as your primary contact and Nicole Winters as your secondary." I nodded. "That's correct." "Second, she knew details about the position that weren't in the public job posting. Specific responsibilities, reporting structures, even some internal terminology we use." My stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" Marcus opened the first folder and pulled out a printed email. "I'm saying your mother had inside information about this job, and I think I know where she got it." He slid the email across the table. It was from Brianna Harper to someone named Jennifer Morrison, with the subject line, "Family Situation, Need Advice." "Jennifer Morrison is our HR coordinator," Marcus explained. "She and your sister apparently know each other through some social media networking group." I read the email, my anger building with each sentence. Brianna had written to Jennifer asking for advice about a family member who was applying for a position she wasn't qualified for. She'd described me as struggling with confidence issues and anxiety, and suggested that it would be kinder to reject her application early rather than let her embarrass herself in the interview. "She sabotaged me before I even walked into the room," I said, my voice barely controlled. "It gets worse." Marcus opened the second folder. "Jennifer forwarded your sister's email to me with a note saying she was concerned about the candidate's mental fitness for the role. I dismissed it because it seemed like hearsay, but then your mother showed up with the same talking. They coordinated this. That's what it looks like. Your sister identified you as a weak candidate. Jennifer planted doubts with the interview team, and your mother delivered the final blow in person." I stared at the emails, feeling a cold fury settle in my chest. This wasn't just family dysfunction or misguided concern. This was a deliberate, coordinated attack on my career. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because it's not right, and because I did some research on you after the interview." He opened the third folder. "Your resume, your references, your portfolio. You're actually exactly what we're looking for in a senior project manager." The folder contained printouts of my LinkedIn profile, samples of my work and what looked like reference checks he'd conducted independently. I called 3 of your former clients. Marcus continued, they all spoke highly of your work. Sarah Martinez from the Martinez Group said you were instrumental in developing their digital strategy. Morrison Industries CEO said you caught a critical error that saved them $50,000. You did reference checks after rejecting me. I did them because something didn't add up. The woman your family described didn't match the professional I was seeing on paper. Marcus leaned back in his chair studying my face. Zoe, I think your family has been systematically undermining your career for years, and I think they're doing it deliberately. But why? Why would they want me to fail? That's a question for a therapist, not a business executive. But I can tell you what I've observed in corporate environments. Some people feel threatened by other people's success, even when it's family, especially when it's family. I thought about my mother's reaction to every achievement I'd ever had, how she always found ways to diminish or dismiss them. I thought about Brianna's casual dismissal of my career, her assumption that I was settling for entry-level work because I wasn't capable of more. So what happens now? I asked. Now I offer you the job. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? The position is still open. The candidate we selected after your interview turned out to have fabricated most of his references. We're back to square one, and you're still the most qualified applicant we've seen. But the things my mother said, your mother isn't applying for the job. You are, and based on your actual qualifications, not your family's opinion of them, I'd like to offer you the position. I sat in stunned silence, processing this unexpected turn. The job I'd wanted, the career opportunity my family had destroyed, was being offered to me anyway. There's one condition, Marcus added. We'll need assurance that your family won't interfere with your work here. What happened at the interview can't happen again. It won't. How can you be sure? I thought about the trust documents sitting on my dining room table, about the boundaries I'd set with my mother that morning, about the new understanding I had of my own financial independence. Because I'm not the same person I was 3 days ago. Marcus smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Good. The position comes with a salary of $95,000, full benefits, and equity options. Can you start Monday? I almost said yes immediately, the old reflexive people-pleasing response that had guided most of my adult decisions. But something made me pause. Can I have the weekend to consider it? Of course. Take your time. We shook hands and Marcus gathered his folders. Zoe, can I give you some unsolicited advice? Sure. Whatever relationship you have with your family, don't let it define your relationship with yourself. You're more capable than they've convinced you to believe. After he left, I sat alone at the coffee shop table, staring at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me looked different somehow. More solid, more present, less like someone who was apologizing for taking up space. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. How did it go? Instead of responding, I called him. They offered me the job. I said when he answered. That's fantastic. Congratulations, Daniel. There's something I need to tell you. About the job. About everything that's been happening. What is it? I don't think I want it. Silence on his end. Then, the job. The job. The traditional career path. The whole I don't think that's what I want anymore. What do you want? I looked around the coffee shop, at the freelancers and entrepreneurs working on their own projects, building their own dreams instead of someone else's. I want to work with you, at our company. I want to be an active partner, not just a silent investor. Zoe, are you sure? This is a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity to work for someone else, to build someone else's vision. But I already own part of a company that's more successful than the one that's offering me a job. I could hear Daniel's smile through the phone. When did you become so business-minded? About 5 minutes ago. Come home. Let's talk about what partnership would actually look like. I drove home through downtown Portland, passing the Castellano Digital building where I'd been humiliated 3 days earlier. Now I owned 40% of that building, 40% of every contract signed in those offices, 40% of every success story that would emerge from that space. Daniel was waiting for me with a bottle of champagne and a laptop full of spreadsheets. If you're serious about this, he said, we need to talk numbers, responsibilities, and long-term vision. I'm serious. We spent the next 3 hours going through every aspect of the business. Current clients, pending proposals, financial projections, staffing needs, expansion plan. Daniel showed me which projects I'd already contributed to without realizing it, and which ones could benefit from my marketing expertise.
The Northwest Health Systems contract, he said, pulling up a proposal draft. This is exactly the kind of project where your skills would be invaluable. They need someone who understands both the technical implementation and the customer experience. I read through the proposal, immediately seeing areas where my background could strengthen their approach. They're focused too much on the back-end infrastructure. What about the patient-facing interface? What about staff training? What about change management? Exactly, those are gaps in our current proposal. What if we restructured this around user experience instead of technical specifications? Daniel's eyes lit up. Show me. We worked until midnight, completely reimagining the Northwest Health Systems proposal. Instead of leading with technical capabilities, we focused on improving patient outcomes. Instead of emphasizing our software expertise, we highlighted our understanding of healthcare workflow. Instead of promising efficiency, we promised transformation. This is brilliant, Daniel said, looking at our revised outline. This doesn't sound like a tech consulting proposal. It sounds like a partnership proposal, because that's what it should be. We're not just implementing software, we're helping them reimagine how they serve patients. Zoe, if we win this contract with your approach, it changes everything. It positions us as strategic consultants, not just technical implementers. And strategic consulting is more valuable than technical implementation. Much more valuable. By the time we finished, I felt more energized than I had in years. This wasn't just work. This was creation, innovation, problem solving at the highest level. This was what I'd been missing in my traditional employment. The sense that my ideas could directly impact the success of the business. So, Daniel said, closing the laptop, are you ready to turn down the Castellano Digital job offer? I laughed at the irony. I'm ready to turn down the job offer so I can run the company that made the offer. Technically, Marcus Chen doesn't know he made an offer to one of his bosses. Should we tell him? Eventually. But let's see how the Northwest Health proposal goes first. The next morning, I called Marcus Chen to decline the position. He sounded disappointed but understanding, especially when I explained that I'd decided to pursue entrepreneurial opportunities instead of traditional employment. If you ever change your mind, he said, the door is always open. Actually, Marcus, there might be opportunities for us to work together in a different capacity. My husband and I are expanding our consulting practice, and we're always looking for strategic partnerships. Your husband's in consulting too? We're partners in Castellano Digital Solutions. A long pause. Castellano Digital, the firm that's competing for the Northwest Health contract. That's right. So you're one of the owners? Yes. Another pause. Well, this is awkward. Why? You offered me a job because you thought I was qualified. Now you know I'm not just qualified. I'm already successful. I guess that's one way to look at it. Marcus, I hope this doesn't change your opinion of our proposal. We're still the best firm for the job regardless of the personal connection. Actually, knowing that you're involved makes me more confident in Castellano Digital's capabilities. Your insights during the interview process, even under those difficult circumstances, showed real strategic thinking. After I hung up, I sat back in my home office chair, looking out at the Portland skyline. 3 days ago, I'd been a struggling employee whose own mother didn't believe in her capability. Now I was a business owner who'd just turned down a job offer so she could focus on running her multi-million-dollar company. My phone rang. Nicole's number. I just got off the phone with your mother, she said without preamble. Oh God, what did she want? She wanted me to stage an intervention. She thinks Daniel has brainwashed you into believing you're some kind of business mogul. What did you tell her? I told her I'd seen the trust documents, and that you're exactly the kind of business mogul she's too blind to recognize. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. She accused me of being part of Daniel's manipulation scheme. I laughed, though it wasn't entirely funny. She really can't accept that I might be capable of success. Zoe, I think your mother's reaction goes deeper than jealousy or control issue. I think she's genuinely threatened by your independence. What do you mean? Think about it. For your entire life, she's been the expert on who you are and what you're capable of. She's been the authority on your limitations and your potential. If you succeed beyond her expectations, it proves she was wrong about you. So if she was wrong about you, what else might she be wrong about? Her entire identity is built on being the wise mother who protects her daughters from their own poor judgment. If you don't need her protection anymore, who is she? I'd never thought about my mother's behavior in those terms, but it made sense. Patricia Harper had built her entire relationship with me, around the premise that I needed her guidance to navigate the world. If I could navigate the world successfully on my own, our entire dynamic became obsolete. That's actually sad, I said. It is sad, but it's not your responsibility to manage her identity crisis. I know, it's just hard to completely write off someone who raised you. You don't have to write her off, but you don't have to sacrifice your success to make her feel needed either. That afternoon, Brianna showed up at our front door. Unlike my mother's dramatic appearances, this visit felt different. She knocked politely and waited when I didn't immediately answer. Zoe, she called through the door. I know you're angry with me. I know you have every right to be, but can we please talk? I considered ignoring her the way I'd ignored my mother's visit, but something in Brianna's voice sounded different, less entitled, more uncertain. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. What do you want? I want to apologize. For which part? Coordinating with Mom to sabotage my interview, or telling everyone I'm mentally unstable? Brianna went. For all of it, I didn't realize how much damage we were doing. You didn't realize that telling my potential employer I was incompetent would damage my career. I thought we were protecting you from embarrassment. Whose embarrassment? Mine or yours? She looked down at her hand. Maybe both. It was the first honest thing I'd heard from a family member in years. Brianna, do you have any idea what it's like to have your own sister actively working against your success? No, I don't. It's like carrying extra weight in a race where everyone else gets to run free. It's like having someone sabotage your car before a road trip, then act surprised when you don't reach your destination. I never thought about it that way, because you never had to. You've never had family members questioning your competence or undermining your opportunity. You've had the opposite experience. Brianna leaned against the doorframe, looking older than her 31 years. You're right, Mom has always supported everything I do, even when it doesn't make sense. Like your lifestyle blog that makes no money. Like my lifestyle blog that makes no money. She agreed. She calls it my creative expression, and tells everyone how proud she is, while calling my actual career entry-level work. While calling your actual career entry-level work. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Brianna said something that surprised me. I think I've been jealous of you. Jealous of what? You're the golden child. You get all the praise and support. I get praise for things that don't matter. You get criticism for things that do matter. But at least what you do is. What do you mean? I mean you have actual skills, actual achievements, actual value in the world. I take pictures of my breakfast and call it a career. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But she looked genuinely distressed, genuinely lost. Brianna, you could have actual achievements too if you wanted them. Could I? Or am I just the pretty one who's supposed to smile and look decorative? You're intelligent, you're organized, you're good with people. Those are marketable skills. But I've never had to develop them because Mom always told me I was perfect the way I was. And she always told me I needed to be fixed. Which pushed you to actually improve yourself. While I stayed exactly where I started, I'd never considered that my mother's criticism might have inadvertently made me stronger while her unconditional support might have made Brianna weaker. It was a disturbing thought. So what now? I asked. Now I'm asking if there's any way to fix this. Any way for us to have a real relationship instead of this toxic competition Mom created. That depends. Are you going to keep undermining my career? No, never again. Are you going to keep telling people I'm unstable or incompetent? No. Are you going to support Mom's attempts to control my life? No. I looked at my sister, this woman who'd been my closest companion as a child and my biggest source of family stress as an adult. She looked small standing on my doorstep, smaller than I'd ever seen her. There's something you should know, I said, about my career, about my finances, about everything Mom thinks she knows about my life. What? I own 40% of a multi-million-dollar company. I have been a successful business owner for 3 years without knowing it. I am not the struggling, incompetent person Mom has convinced both of us I am. Brianna's eyes widened. What are you talking about? I told her about the trust documents, about Daniel's revelation, about the true value of my stake in Castellano Digital. I watched her face change as the implications sank in. You're rich? I'm financially independent. And you've been this whole time? I've been this whole time? Brianna sat down heavily on our front step. Mom is going to lose her mind. Mom has already lost her mind. The question is whether you're going to support her delusions or accept reality. I choose reality. Good.
Because reality is that I don't need anyone's permission or approval to live my life anymore. Does this mean you'll forgive me? I considered the question. Forgiveness felt premature, but so did permanent estrangement. It means I'm willing to try to rebuild our relationship if you're serious about changing how you treat me. I'm serious. Then prove it. That evening, Daniel and I celebrated my decision to join the company full-time with dinner at our favorite restaurant in the Pearl District. We talked about restructuring my role, about the projects I wanted to lead, about the direction we wanted to take the business. I keep thinking about what my mother said I told him over dessert. About men like you not giving away millions of dollars to women like me. What about it? She's right. In a way, most men wouldn't do what you did. Most men don't have partners who contribute the way you do. But you set up the trust before you knew I'd contribute. Daniel set down his fork and looked at me directly. Zoe, I set up the trust because I believed in your potential even when you didn't believe in it yourself. I saw who you could become if someone gave you the opportunity and the resources. And now you're becoming exactly who I always knew you were. We walked home through the Pearl District, past the boutiques and galleries and coffee shops that made up our neighborhood. I felt different walking these familiar streets, like I was seeing them through new eyes. These weren't just the places where I lived and worked. These were the places where I'd built a successful business, where I'd created something valuable, My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. Hope you don't mind me reaching out. But I wanted you to know that our team reviewed the Northwest Health proposal today. It's exactly what they're looking for. I think Castellano Digital has a very good chance of winning this contract. I showed the text to Daniel. That's the proposal we rewrote together, he said. That's our proposal. Our first official collaboration. Hopefully the first of many. When we got home, I found an envelope that had been slipped under our front door. My name was written on it in my mother's careful handwriting. Are you going to read it? Daniel asked. Yeah, but not tonight. I set the envelope on our kitchen counter, where it would wait until I was ready to deal with whatever new manipulation or guilt trip my mother had devised. Tonight was for celebrating the life I was building, not for managing the drama I was leaving behind. Monday morning felt like the first day of a completely different life. I woke up before my alarm, energized in a way I hadn't experienced since college. Today wasn't just another day at someone else's company, grinding through tasks that felt disconnected from any larger purpose. Today was my first official day as an active partner at Castellano Digital Solutions. Daniel had already left for an early meeting with potential investors, but he'd left a coffee and a note on the kitchen counter. Welcome to the ownership side of business. You belong here. I dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal suit that projected authority without trying too hard. Looking in the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized. Not because my appearance had changed, but because the person looking back at me carried herself differently. There was a steadiness in her gaze, a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there a week ago. The drive to our offices in downtown Portland felt different too. Instead of the anxiety that usually accompanied Monday mornings, I felt anticipation. I was driving to my own company, to work on projects I'd helped design, with clients who valued my input. The Castellano Digital building rose 15 stories above the Pearl District, its glass facade reflecting the morning light off the Willamette River. I'd been in this building dozens of times for company events and meetings, but I'd always felt like a visitor. Now I was walking into my own space. Linda Rodriguez from HR was waiting for me in the lobby with a stack of paperwork and a warm smile. Miss Harper, welcome to your first official day. I have to say, when Daniel told us you'd be joining as a partner, it explained a lot about some of the strategic insights that have been shaping our proposals lately. She handed me an employee badge, though I supposed it should have been labeled owner instead of employee. My name was printed beneath the company logo, with the title Senior Partner, Strategic Development. Daniel thought you might want to start by meeting with the Northwest Health Systems team. Linda continued as we rode the elevator to the executive floor. They're presenting the final proposal to the client on Thursday. I'd like that very much. The 14th floor housed the executive offices and conference rooms, spaces I'd only glimpsed during holiday parties. Now Linda was leading me to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Mount Hood in the distance. This is your office, she said, opening the door to reveal a space that was both professional and welcoming. Daniel had it prepared over the weekend. The office was furnished with a glass desk, leather chairs and a conference table that could seat 6 people. But what caught my attention was the wall display behind the desk. It contained framed copies of every project I'd contributed to over the past 3 years, presented as professional achievements, rather than casual assistance. The Martinez Group Digital Transformation Strategy, the Morrison Industries Workflow Optimization Plan, the Henderson Healthcare Patient Experience Redesign. Each one was mounted and labeled with my name as the lead strategist. I was still absorbing this visual representation of my professional accomplishments when Daniel appeared in the doorway. "What do you I think you've been documenting my work more carefully than I have." "I've been documenting our work, the only difference is that now it's official." He walked over to the window wall, gesturing toward the city below. "Zoe, do you see that building across the street? The blue glass tower?" "Yeah. That's where you interviewed last week. Where your mother tried to convince them you were incompetent for a job that pays $95,000 a year." I followed his gaze to the building where I'd experienced the worst professional humiliation of my life. "Now look around this off. You're sitting in a space worth more than most people's houses, as a partner in a company worth $12 million, with a stake that's appreciating by the month. What's your point?" "My point is that your mother was trying to save you from a job that would have been a step backward from where you already are." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been devastated about losing an opportunity that was actually beneath my current position. "There's something else," Daniel said, pulling out his phone. "Marcus Chen called this morning. Northwest Health Systems wants to meet with us tomorrow instead of Thursday. They're excited about the proposal and want to move forward quickly." "That's good news." "It's great news. And they specifically requested that you be part of the presentation team." "They requested me." Marcus told them about your strategic insights, and they want to hear your thoughts on user experience and change management. I felt a flutter of nerves mixed with excitement. This would be my first major client presentation as an acknowledged partner, rather than a behind-the-scenes contributor. "Are you ready for this?" Daniel asked. "I think so, but I should probably meet with the team first. Understand exactly what we're proposing." "They're waiting for you in conference room A." The Northwest Health Systems team consisted of 4 senior consultants, all of whom I'd met at various company functions, but never worked with directly. They welcomed me with the kind of professional courtesy that suggested Daniel had prepared them for my new role. Sarah Kim, the lead technical consultant, presented the current proposal structure while I reviewed the material. It was comprehensive and well-researched, but I could see immediately where my contributions had strengthened their approach. The original proposal focused heavily on data migration and system integration, Sarah explained. But your insights about patient experience and staff adoption completely reframed how we're presenting the solution. "Show me the before and after," I said. Sarah pulled up 2 versions of the proposal on the conference room's large monitor. The original version read like a technical manual, full of specifications and implementation timelines. The revised version, incorporating my suggestions, read like a transformation roadmap focused on improving patient outcome. "The client isn't buying software," I said, reading through the executive summary. "They're buying better patient care. The technology is just the mechanism." "Exactly," said James Morton, the project manager, "and that perspective came from you." We spent the next 3 hours preparing for tomorrow's presentation. I found myself naturally taking the lead on sections related to user experience and organizational change, while the technical team handled the implementation detail. It felt seamless, like a collaboration that had been developing for years rather than days. By lunchtime, I was completely absorbed in the work. This wasn't just more engaging than my previous job. It was fundamentally different. Instead of executing someone else's vision, I was helping to create the vision. Instead of being one voice among many, my input was shaping the entire approach. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. "How's your first day as a mogul?" I replied, terrifying and exhilarating. "Good combo." "Lunch later?" "Can't. Preparing for huge client presentation tomorrow." "Look at you being all CEO-ish. I'm proud of you." Around 2 o'clock, Linda Rodriguez knocked on my office door with a concerned expression. "Zoe, there's someone here to see you. She says she's your mother and that it's urgent." My stomach dropped. Patricia Harper had somehow found out where I worked and had come to my new office on my first day. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. "Did she say what she wants?" "She said there's been a family emergency, and she needs to speak with you immediately." I knew there was no family emergency. This was my mother's standard escalation tactic when other forms of manipulation weren't working. But refusing to see her would create a scene that could embarrass me in front of my new colleagues. Put her in the small conference room on the 12th floor. Tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes. I needed a moment to center myself before facing whatever new crisis my mother had manufactured. I walked to my office window and looked out at the Portland skyline, reminding myself that I was no longer the same person who could be easily manipulated. When I entered the conference room, my mother was sitting at the polished table with her purse clutched in front of her like a shield. She looked smaller than usual, less commanding, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the old sympathy that had kept me tethered to her for so many years. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, her voice carefully modulated. "I wasn't sure you would. What's the emergency?" "The emergency is that you're destroying our family." I sat down across from her, maintaining the kind of professional composure I'd learned from watching Daniel in difficult business meetings. "How am I destroying our family? You've turned Brianna against me. She came to see me yesterday and said things, terrible things about how I've treated you over the years." "What kind of things?" "She said I've been sabotaging your career. She said I've been undermining your confidence. She actually used the word gaslighting." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her she was being dramatic, that everything I've done has been out of love and concern for your well-being." I studied my mother's face, looking for signs of genuine self-reflection, but her expression was the same one she'd worn during every other crisis in our relationship: hurt, defensive, and completely convinced of her own righteousness. "Mom, do you remember what you said to Marcus Chen during my job interview?" "I told him I was concerned about your mental health." "You told him I was mentally unstable and couldn't handle responsibility, because I was worried about you taking on more than you could handle." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on 32 years of being your mother. Based on 32 years of convincing yourself I was incompetent so you could feel needed." Patricia's composure cracked slightly. "That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you supported one of my achievements without immediately pointing out its limitations?" "I've always supported you. You called my college graduation just the beginning of real learning. You said my wedding was hopefully not a mistake. You dismissed my job as entry-level work." "That's not support. That's sabotage disguised as concern." "I was trying to keep you grounded. You were trying to keep me small." We sat in silence for a moment. Then my mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "Honey, I know you're angry with me. I know you think I've been too critical, but I'm your mother. Everything I've done has been because I love you." The old Zoe would have melted at this gesture, would have accepted the non-apology, and agreed to reconcile for the sake of family peace. But the new Zoe recognized the manipulation for what it was. "Mom, let me ask you something. If you found out that I was actually very successful, very capable, and very financially secure, how would that make you feel?" "I'd be happy for you, of course." "Would you? Or would you feel like you'd wasted years worrying about someone who didn't need your worry?" "That's a horrible thing to suggest. It's an honest question. Your entire relationship with me is built on the premise that I need your guidance and protection. If I don't need those things, what's left?" Patricia pulled her hand back, her expression hardening. "What's left is the love between a mother and daughter. Then show me that love by accepting who I actually am, instead of who you think I should be. And who do you think you actually are?" I stood up, feeling more confident than I ever had in a conversation with my mother. "I'm a successful business owner. I'm a strategic consultant, whose insights generate millions of dollars in revenue. I'm a woman who is financially independent and professionally respected. I'm someone who no longer needs anyone's permission to live her life. You're living in a fantasy. I'm living in reality. The fantasy is the version of me you've created to justify your need to control my life." I walked toward the conference room door, then turned back. "Mom, I'm going to tell you something that I should have told you years ago. I don't need you to protect me from my own ambitions. I don't need you to save me from my own mistakes. I don't need you to manage my career or my relationships, or my decisions. What I need is for you to see me as I actually am, and love that person, not the diminished version you've convinced yourself I am. And if I can't do that, then we don't have a relationship worth preserving." I left her sitting in the conference room, and returned to my office, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of finally speaking my truth to the person who'd shaped my self-doubt for 3 decades. Daniel was waiting for me with a cup of tea and a concerned expression. "Linda told me your mother was here. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm free." "What happened?" I told him about the conversation,
About my mother's refusal to acknowledge her role in undermining my confidence. About the ultimatum I'd finally given her. How do you feel about it? Sad, relieved, scared, proud, all at the same time. That sounds about right for setting boundaries with toxic family members. My phone rang, Brianna's number. She called you already? I said to Daniel, probably. Are you going to answer? I declined the call and turned my phone to silent. Whatever family crisis my conversation with my mother had created, it could wait until after I'd successfully launched my new career. The rest of the afternoon was spent refining our presentation for Northwest Health System. By 5 o'clock we had a compelling narrative that positioned Castellano Digital, not just as a technology vendor, but as a strategic partner in healthcare transformation. This is going to work, said Sarah Kim, as we wrapped up our final planning session. The client is going to love this approach. More importantly, added James Morton, it's going to actually solve their problems instead of just digitizing their existing inefficiencies. That evening, Daniel and I went to dinner at a quiet restaurant in the hills above Portland, away from the bustle of downtown and the possibility of family drama. We sat on the restaurant's deck, overlooking the city lights, discussing the next day's presentation and the future of our business partnership. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Daniel asked, terrified, but the good kind of terrified. There's the kind that means you're doing something that matters. You know what I'm most excited about? What? Watching you present your ideas to a room full of healthcare executives, and seeing them realize they're talking to someone who really understands their challenges. What if I mess up? You won't mess up, but even if you did, you're presenting as a company owner, not as someone auditioning for a job. The worst thing that happens is we don't get this particular contract. The best thing that happens is that we land a $2.7 million deal and establish ourselves as the premier healthcare consulting firm in the Pacific Northwest. We drove home through the Portland night, past the building where I'd been humiliated a week ago, past the coffee shop where I'd first learned about my secret business ownership, past all the landmarks of my old life as someone who didn't know her own worth. When we arrived home, there were 17 missed calls on my phone, 12 from my mother, 3 from Brianna, and 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. Are you going to listen to the voicemails? Daniel asked. Tomorrow, after the presentation. Good choice. I fell asleep that night thinking about the conference room full of healthcare executives I'd be facing the next morning. A week ago, the thought of presenting to such a high-level audience would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety and self-doubt. Now I felt ready to show them exactly what Castellano Digital Solutions could do for their organization. More importantly, I felt ready to show them exactly what I could do. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Portland weather that usually dampened my mood. But today it felt appropriate, like the city was providing a calm backdrop to what would likely be one of the most important professional moments of my life. I dressed in my best navy suit, the one I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to arrive. Today was definitely a special occasion. Daniel and I arrived at the Northwest Health Systems headquarters 30 minutes early, giving us time to set up our presentation materials and review our talking points one final time. The conference room was impressive, with a wall of windows overlooking the Cascade Mountains and a table that could seat 20 people. Big room, I observed. Big contract, Daniel replied. At exactly 9 o'clock, the Northwest Health Systems team filed into the conference room. There were 8 of them, including the CEO, the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Medical Officer, and several department heads. They looked like exactly the kind of serious, accomplished professionals who would normally intimidate me into silence. But today I felt different. Today I wasn't trying to impress them so they'd hire me. Today I was showing them how my company could solve their problems. Marcus Chen, who was serving as our internal liaison, made the introduction. When he got to me he said, "And this is Zoe Harper, Senior Partner for Strategic Development at Castellano Digital." Zoe specializes in user experience and organizational change management. The CEO, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Patricia Wells, looked directly at me. "Ms. Harper, I've reviewed your preliminary analysis of our patient flow challenges. I'm curious about your perspective on implementation timelines." It was exactly the kind of question that would have paralyzed me a week ago. Today I had a clear, confident answer. Wells, based on our assessment of your current systems and staff capacity, I'd recommend a phased implementation over 18 months, rather than the typical 12-month timeline most vendors propose. Why longer? Because successful digital transformation isn't just about installing new software. It's about changing how people work, how they think about their roles, and how they interact with patients. If you rush that cultural change, you end up with expensive technology that nobody uses effectively. Dr. Wells nodded approvingly. That's refreshing. Most consultants promise unrealistic implementation speeds. Most consultants are selling you technology. We're selling you organizational transformation. The presentation that followed was the most professionally satisfying hour of my career. Every question they asked, I had a thoughtful answer. Every concern they raised, I had a practical solution. Every challenge they described, I could address with specific strategies drawn from my experience with similar healthcare organizations. By the time we finished, it was clear that Northwest Health Systems wasn't just interested in our proposal, they were excited about it. Miss Harper, said the Chief Medical Officer, your insights about physician workflow optimization are exactly what we've been looking for.
Most technology companies don't understand the clinical side of healthcare. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. I think the key is remembering that healthcare technology should make doctors better at being doctors, not turn them into data entry clerks. After we packed up our materials and left the building, Daniel and I sat in his car in the parking lot, both of us processing what had just happened. That was incredible, he said. You commanded that room. It felt incredible. Like I was finally doing what I was meant to do. And I think we just landed our biggest contract ever. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. Preliminary feedback from the team is extremely positive. Dr. Wells was particularly impressed with your strategic insights. Expect a call later today. I showed the message to Daniel. So how does it feel to be a successful business owner? He asked. Like something I should have been doing all along. We drove back to our office in comfortable silence, both of us absorbing the significance of what had just happened. I'd presented to a room full of healthcare executives as an equal, not as someone seeking their approval. I'd answered their questions with authority, not with anxiety. I'd represented my company with confidence, not with apology. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Back at the office, Linda Rodriguez was waiting for us with champagne and a huge smile. I just got off the phone with Dr. Wells' office, she announced. They want to move forward with the contract. Congratulations, you just landed the biggest deal in company history. The champagne tasted like victory, like vindication, like everything I'd been working toward without knowing it. As I looked around the office at my colleagues celebrating our success, I realized that this was what I'd been missing in all my previous jobs. The sense that my contributions mattered, that my insights were valued, that my success was tied directly to my efforts. My phone started ringing, my mother's number. I declined the call and raised my champagne glass. To new beginnings, I said. To recognizing what was always there, Daniel corrected. To finally becoming who I was meant to be. 3 months later, I stood in the same conference room where my mother had ambushed my job interview, but this time I was there as a client, not a candidate. Castellano Digital had been hired by Marcus Chen's company to overhaul their entire project management system, a contract worth $800,000 over 2 years. The irony wasn't lost on me as I set up my laptop and presentation materials in the space where I'd once been humiliated. Marcus arrived early, carrying coffee for both of us and wearing the kind of smile that suggested he appreciated the symmetry as much as I did. I have to ask, he said, settling into his chair, how does it feel to be back in this room? Like closing a circle, I replied. Though I think I prefer being on this side of the table. Your company's proposal for our digital transformation was brilliant. I particularly appreciated your insights about change management and user adoption. Thank you. Those insights come from experience with organizations that tried to implement new systems without considering the human element. The meeting that followed was everything the original interview should have been. Professional, collaborative, focused on solving real business problems rather than defending my mental health. By the time we finished, Marcus's team had approved our implementation timeline and agreed to expand the project scope to include their Seattle office. As I packed up my materials, Marcus walked me to the elevator. Zoe, can I tell you something that might sound strange? Sure, I'm glad your mother sabotaged that interview. I paused, surprised by his directness. Why? Because if we'd hired you as our senior project manager, you'd be working for me instead of the other way around. And frankly, you're too talented to be anyone's employee. That's kind of you to say. It's not kindness, it's business reality. You've built something remarkable with Daniel. Don't ever let anyone convince you to settle for less than what you've created. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside with a renewed appreciation for how dramatically my life had changed. 6 months ago, I would have been grateful for any job offer. Now I was turning down opportunities because they didn't match my vision for my career. Back at Castellano Digital, our offices buzzed with the energy of a company in rapid expansion. The Northwest Health Systems contract had led to 3 additional healthcare clients, and our revenue projections for the year had doubled. We'd hired 12 new employees, and were looking at leasing additional office space. Daniel found me in my office reviewing applications for a new strategic development manager. How did the meeting with Marcus go? Excellent. They approved the expansion to Seattle, which means the contract value just increased to $1.2 million. That's fantastic. Our biggest client just got bigger. I looked at the financial reports spread across my desk, each page showing steady growth in revenue, profitability and market share. The business that had once seemed abstract and impossible to understand now felt as familiar as my own heartbeat. Daniel, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't told me about the trust? You mean if you'd stayed in traditional employment? Yeah, if I'd taken that job at Marcus's company, or found something similar. Daniel sat down across from my desk, considering the question seriously. I think eventually you would have figured out that you were capable of more than other people believe. Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe it would have been more difficult, but your talent and intelligence would have found a way to surface. You really think so? I know so. The woman who could redesign a healthcare proposal and land a multi-million-dollar contract was always there. She just needed the right circumstances to emerge, and the right family to step out of the way. Speaking of family, have you listened to your mother's voicemails yet? I gestured toward my phone, which had been collecting increasingly frantic messages for weeks. I looked at the transcript. The progression is interesting from a psychological perspective. How so? Week 1 was anger and accusations. Week 2 was guilt and manipulation. Week 3 was bargaining and promises to change. Week 4 was denial and attempts to rewrite history. And this week she's telling relatives that I've had a nervous breakdown and that Daniel is controlling my medical treatment. Daniel's expression darkened. She's really doubling down on the mental health angle. It's her last resort. If she can't convince me I'm incompetent, she'll try to convince everyone else I'm unstable. Are you worried about that affecting your reputation? I pulled up my LinkedIn profile on my computer screen. Over the past 3 months, I'd received connection requests from dozens of healthcare executives, speaking invitations from 3 industry conferences, and inquiries about consulting opportunities from companies across the West Coast. I think my professional reputation can withstand my mother's gossip campaign. What about your personal relationships? Are you worried about losing extended family? It was a question I'd been avoiding, partly because the answer was more complicated than I wanted to admit. My mother's version of events had indeed influenced some relatives, particularly my father's sister, who'd always been close to Patricia. I'd received several concerned phone calls from cousins and family friends, who'd been told I was having psychological problems. The family members who matter know the truth, I said finally. The ones who don't matter are easy to let go of. And Brianna? Brianna is in therapy, which is probably the healthiest thing she's ever done for herself. My sister had surprised everyone by using our confrontation as a catalyst for genuine self-reflection. She'd enrolled in business classes at Portland Community College, and was developing a legitimate consulting practice around social media strategy for small businesses. Our relationship was still fragile, but it was based on honesty for the first time in our adult lives. She called me yesterday, I continued. She's landing actual clients who pay actual money for her expertise. How does that feel? Good, really good. I want her to succeed on her own merits instead of just coasting on mom's unconditional support. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. Drinks tonight to celebrate your latest business conquest. I replied, can't. Board meeting prep. Board meeting. It still felt surreal to type those words. Castellano Digital was preparing for a Series B funding round that would value the company at $35 million. My 40% stake, which had been worth about $5 million 6 months ago, was now approaching $14 million. The meeting that evening was held at the offices of Peterson and Associates, the investment firm that was leading our funding round. Daniel and I sat at a polished conference table with 7 venture capitalists, discussing expansion plans, market opportunities and revenue projections. Harper, said Catherine Peterson, the firm's managing partner, your strategic development initiatives have been instrumental in driving Castellano Digital's growth. Can you walk us through your vision for scaling these capabilities? 6 months ago, I would have deferred to Daniel or apologized for my opinions before sharing them. Now I presented my expansion strategy with confidence and specificity. We're seeing increasing demand for healthcare technology consulting, particularly around user experience and change management. I recommend establishing a dedicated healthcare division with specialized consultants in each major market. What's the investment requirement for that expansion? Approximately $2.5 million in the first year, primarily for talent acquisition and market development. But the potential return is significant. Healthcare organizations are desperate for consultants who understand both technology and clinical workflow, and you have the expertise to lead this division. I have the expertise and the track record. Our healthcare contracts have generated $8.3 million in revenue over the past 6 months, with a client satisfaction rate of 98%. The investors looked impressed. One of them, a woman named Janet Liu, leaned forward. Ms. Harper, your background is unusual for someone in your position. Most strategic development partners come from traditional consulting firms or business schools. How do you account for your success? It was the kind of question that once would have triggered my imposter syndrome. Instead, I saw it as an opportunity to explain what made our approach different. I think my background is actually an advantage. I understand what it's like to feel overlooked and undervalued in professional settings, which makes me better at designing systems that empower all users, not just the power user. I know what it's like to have your competence questioned, which makes me more thorough in my analysis and more careful in my recommendations. That's a fascinating perspective. It's also a profitable perspective. Organizations that invest in inclusive design and change management see higher adoption rates, better employee satisfaction, and stronger long-term outcomes. The meeting concluded with Peterson and Associates agreeing to lead our Series B round at the valuation we'd requested. As we left their offices, Daniel turned to me with an expression of pure admiration. You were incredible in there. I was honest. For the first time in my professional life, I was completely honest about my capabilities and my vision. How does it feel? Like I've been holding my breath for 32 years and finally learned how to exhale. We walked through downtown Portland in the evening light, past the building where I'd once worked as a junior marketing coordinator, past the coffee shop where I'd first learned about my business ownership, past all the landmarks of my transformation from insecure employee to confident executive. Daniel, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think I'm a different person now, or just the same person in different circumstances? He considered the question carefully. I think you're the same person you always were, but now you're living in alignment with your actual capabilities instead of other people's limitations. That's a good way to put it. The woman who redesigned the Northwest Health System's proposal was always there. The woman who commanded that board meeting tonight was always there. She just needed permission to exist. And you gave me that permission. No, Zoe, I gave you the resources. You gave yourself the permission. When we arrived home, there was a package waiting on our doorstep, a small box with my name written in careful handwriting that I didn't recognize. Inside was a handwritten letter and a newspaper clipping from the Portland Business Journal. The letter was from Elena Martinez, a woman I'd never met, who worked as a project manager at a large healthcare system in Seattle. Dear Ms. Harper, I saw the article about your success at Castellano Digital and wanted to thank you for something you probably don't remember. 3 years ago, you spoke at a small networking event for women in healthcare technology. You talked about believing in your own expertise even when others questioned it. I was going through a difficult time with my family, who didn't support my career ambitions, and your words gave me the courage to pursue a promotion I didn't think I deserved. I got the job, and it changed my life. I wanted you to know that your success is inspiring other women to believe in themselves too. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished. The newspaper clipping was a feature article about successful women entrepreneurs in Portland, with my photo and a quote about the importance of recognizing your own worth regardless of family expectations. I showed the letter to Daniel, feeling unexpectedly emotional. You're becoming a role model, he said. I'm becoming myself. Same thing in your case. That night I finally listened to my mother's voicemail. 27 messages spanning 3 months, documenting her progression through the stages of losing control over someone she'd manipulated for decades. The early messages were angry. You're making a terrible mistake. Daniel is using you. You'll regret this when reality sets. The middle messages were pleading. I know I wasn't perfect, but I love you. Family is supposed to forgive each other. Can't we find a way to work this out? The recent messages were desperate. People are asking me why you won't talk to your own mother. I don't know what to tell them. Please call me back. I don't understand what happened to my daughter. I deleted all of them without responding. The next morning brought news that Northwest Health Systems wanted to expand our contract to include their facilities in California and Arizona. The deal value had grown to over $4 million, making it the largest healthcare technology consulting contract in Oregon history. We need to celebrate, Daniel said, opening a bottle of champagne in my office. We need to work, I replied,
but I accepted the glass he offered. Zoe, 6 months ago you were worried about affording a weekend trip to the coast. Now you're managing multi-million-dollar contracts and making decisions that affect hundreds of employees. Don't you think that deserves a moment of appreciation? I looked around my office, at the framed project summaries on the walls, at the financial reports showing steady growth, at the window overlooking a city where I was increasingly recognized as a business leader. You're right, this does deserve appreciation. So how do you want to celebrate? I want to write a letter. To who? To the woman I used to be. I pulled out a sheet of company letterhead and began writing. Dear past Zoe, you're going to spend a lot of years thinking you're not smart enough, capable enough, or strong enough to succeed on your own terms. You're going to let other people's opinions become your reality, and you're going to apologize for taking up space in rooms where you belong. But here's what I need you to know. You are already everything you need to be. The intelligence is there, the capability is there, the strength is there. It's all there, waiting for you to give yourself permission to use it. Stop asking for validation from people who benefit from your smallness. Stop accepting jobs that undervalue your contributions. Stop letting family members convince you that their fears are your limitation. You own a multi-million-dollar company. You're a recognized expert in your field. You're financially independent and professionally respected. You're not lucky. You're not an imposter. You're not a fraud who's about to be discovered. You're exactly who you were always meant to be. The only thing that changes is your willingness to believe it. Love, future Zoe. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer, next to the trust documents that had started this entire transformation. Feel better? Daniel asked. I feel complete. That afternoon, I received a call from Dr. Tricia Wells at Northwest Health Systems. Zoe, I wanted to personally thank you for the work you've done with our organization. The preliminary results from your implementation strategy are exceeding all our expectations. That's wonderful to hear, Dr. Wells. I also wanted to let you know that I've been contacted by colleagues at other health systems who are interested in similar consulting services. Would Castellano Digital be open to referrals? We'd be very interested. Excellent. I think you're going to find that word of mouth in the healthcare industry travels quickly when someone delivers exceptional results. After I hung up, I realized that I'd just received exactly the kind of professional validation I'd been seeking my entire career. Not from family members who felt obligated to support me, not from friends who wanted to make me feel better, but from clients who valued my work because it solved their problems and generated results. My phone buzzed with a text from Brianna. Saw the article in the business journal. I'm proud of you, I replied. Thank you. How are your classes going? Really well. I'm learning that I actually like business strategy when it's not just pretending to be productive. I'm glad. You're capable of more than anyone realized, including me. That evening, Daniel and I hosted a dinner party for our management team and their partners. Our dining room was filled with the people who'd helped build Castellano Digital into one of the most successful consulting firms in the Pacific Northwest. The conversation was energetic and optimistic, focused on the future rather than dwelling on past struggles. After our guests left, Daniel and I sat on our back deck with glasses of wine, looking out over the Portland skyline. Any regrets? He asked. About the path you took to get here. About the family relationships you've lost. About the years you spent underestimating yourself. I considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. I would have regretted the conflict, the pain, the disruption to family peace. But now, looking at the life I'd built by refusing to accept other people's limitations, I felt something different. No regrets, I said finally. Everything that happened, including the painful parts, led me to exactly where I need to be. Even your mother's sabotage, especially my mother's sabotage. If she hadn't destroyed that job interview, I might never have learned about I might have spent years working for other people instead of building something of my own. So she accidentally gave you the best gift of your life. She accidentally forced me to discover who I really am. As I spoke those words, I realized they were completely true. My mother's attempts to diminish me had ultimately revealed my strength. Her efforts to control me had catalyzed my independence. Her refusal to see my capabilities had forced me to prove them to myself. I should probably thank her, I said, half joking. Are you going to call her? No. But I'm going to stop being angry with her. What's the difference? Anger keeps you connected to the people who hurt you. Indifference sets you free. Later that night, I updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect my new role as Managing Partner of Strategic Development at Castellano Digital Solutions. Within hours, I received messages from former colleagues, potential clients and industry contacts congratulating me on my success. One message stood out from the rest. It was from Jennifer Morrison, the HR coordinator who had helped coordinate my job interview sabotage months earlier. "Hi Zoe, I saw your promotion announcement and wanted to reach out. I owe you an apology for my role in what happened during your interview process. I realize now that I allowed personal relationships to compromise my professional judgment, and I'm sorry for any harm that caused. I hope you can forgive my mistake. Congratulations on your success with Castellano Digital." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a mixture of vindication and forgiveness. Jennifer Morrison had been manipulated by my family just as I had been, and her apology suggested that she'd gained some clarity about the situation. I wrote back, "Thank you for your message, Jennifer. I appreciate your apology and your honesty. No hard feelings." Sometimes these situations reveal more about the people who create them than the people who get caught in them. I wish you all the best. As I hit send, I felt the last piece of resentment about that disastrous job interview dissolve. I was no longer the woman who'd been humiliated in that conference room. I was the woman who'd turned that humiliation into motivation, who'd transformed sabotage into success, who'd discovered her own worth despite everyone who'd tried to convince her she was worthless. 3 weeks later, I received an invitation to speak at the National Healthcare Technology Conference in San Francisco. The topic they wanted me to address was From Employee to Entrepreneur, Building Strategic Consulting Practices in Healthcare. As I worked on my presentation, I thought about the journey that had brought me from a struggling marketing coordinator to a nationally recognized business leader. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been linear, but it had been authentic in a way that my previous career had never been. I was no longer trying to prove myself to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth their approval. I was no longer accepting other people's definitions of my limitations. I was no longer apologizing for my success or minimizing my achievement. I was exactly who I'd always been, finally living the life I'd always deserved. The morning of my speaking engagement, I put on my best suit and looked in the mirror one final time. The woman looking back at me was confident, accomplished, and completely comfortable with her own power. She wasn't the scared, insecure person who'd walked into that job interview 8 months ago. She was the person that scared, insecure woman had always had the potential to become. As I walked onto the stage in front of 300 healthcare executives, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the people who'd believed in me from the beginning, though I appreciated them, but for the people who doubted me, dismissed me, and tried to diminish me. Because in proving them wrong, I discovered exactly how right I'd always been about myself. The presentation went perfect. The audience was engaged, the questions were thoughtful, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. Afterward, dozens of executives approached me with consulting inquiries, partnership opportunities, and speaking invitations. But the moment that mattered most came when a young woman who looked to be in her late 20s approached me with tears in her eyes. "Miss Harper, your presentation was exactly what I needed to hear. I've been letting my family convince me that I'm not ready for the promotion I want, and listening to you made me realize that they're wrong. I'm going to apply for the director position at my company." "Good for you," I said. "What's the worst thing that could happen?" They could say, "And what's the best thing that could happen?" They could say yes, and I could finally start building the career I actually want. Then it sounds like a risk worth taking. As I flew home to Portland that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed. 8 months ago, I'd been a woman who didn't know her own worth, living in fear of her family's disapproval, accepting jobs that undervalued her contributions. Now I was a successful entrepreneur, a respected consultant, and a role model for other women who'd been taught to think small. The change hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been without cost. I'd lost relationships that I'd once thought were essential, and I'd had to confront painful truths about the people who'd shaped my early understanding of myself. But what I'd gained was infinitely more valuable than what I'd lost. I'd gained the ability to see myself clearly, to value my own opinions, to trust my own judgment. I'd gained financial independence, professional respect, and personal peace. Most importantly, I'd gained the knowledge that I was exactly who I'd always been meant to be, not the diminished version my family had preferred, not the insecure woman who'd accepted their limitations as truth, but the confident, capable, successful person who'd been waiting inside me all along. The plane touched down in Portland as the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I looked out the window at the city where I'd built my new life, where I'd discovered my true capabilities, where I'd finally learned to value myself as much as I valued others. I was home, not just geographically, but in every sense that mattered. I was home in my own skin, in my own success, in my own understanding of who I was and what I was capable of achieving. And for the first time in my life, That felt like more than enough. It felt like everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.